Sarah Johnson had worked her entire life for this moment, closing the biggest deal of her career while representing one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. The first-class ticket to Los Angeles was supposed to be a symbol of how far she'd come from her humble beginnings in Detroit. Instead, it became the stage for a confrontation that would test everything she believed about success, dignity, and justice. What began as a routine business flight would spiral into a battle for respect that reached the highest levels of corporate America. But sometimes the most unexpected challenges become the catalysts for the most extraordinary triumphs. This is the story of a woman who refused to be moved to the back of the plane and ended up moving an entire industry forward. Sarah Johnson adjusted her blazer one last time before stepping into the gleaming lobby of Morrison & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. The marble floors reflected the morning sunlight streaming through floor to ceiling windows, and she couldn't help but smile at how far she'd come. Just 5 years out of law school, and here she was, about to close the biggest deal of her career. "Ms. Johnson, Mr. Morrison will see you now," the receptionist announced, her voice echoing slightly in the spacious lobby. Sarah gathered her leather portfolio and walked confidently down the hallway, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The past 6 months of negotiations had led to this moment. The Henderson case, a complex corporate merger worth $50 million, had consumed her life, but it was finally coming together. "Sarah!" Robert Morrison stood from behind his mahogany desk, extending a firm handshake. At 62, he was a legend in corporate law, and Sarah still couldn't quite believe she was working directly with him. "Outstanding work on the Henderson merger. Simply outstanding. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I appreciate your confidence in me throughout this process." Sarah settled into the plush leather chair across from his desk, trying to project the calm professionalism that had gotten her this far. Morrison leaned back, his fingers steepled. "I have to admit, when I first assigned you this case, there were some partners who questioned whether someone so young could handle something of this magnitude. But you've exceeded every expectation." Sarah nodded, remembering those early days, when she'd felt the weight of skeptical glances in conference rooms. Being one of only 3 black attorneys at the firm had taught her to let her work speak louder than any words could. "The client specifically requested that you handle the final phase personally," Morrison continued. "They want you in Los Angeles tomorrow for the signing ceremony. Everything's arranged. First-class flight, 5-star hotel, the works. Consider it a small token of the firm's appreciation." Sarah's heart raced. First class. She'd never flown first class in her life. Growing up in Detroit with her grandmother after her parents died, luxury had been a foreign concept. Even now with her success, she was careful with money, always, mindful of how quickly circumstances could change. "Mr. Morrison, that's incredibly generous, but Coach would be perfectly fine." "Nonsense." He waved away her protest. "This deal will bring in more revenue than any case we've handled in the past 3 years. You deserve to travel in style. Besides, you'll be representing the firm. Image matters in this business, as you well know." After leaving Morrison's office, Sarah couldn't contain her excitement. She called her best friend, Lisa Thompson, who'd been her roommate at Northwestern Law. "Girl, first class to L.A.? You're living the dream." Lisa's enthusiasm was infectious, even through the phone. "Remember when we used to split packages of ramen because we were so broke?" Sarah laughed, remembering those lean years. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out this is all a dream. Sometimes I still can't believe I made it here." "You didn't just make it, Sarah. You earned every single thing you've achieved. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." That evening, Sarah packed carefully, selecting her best business suits and making sure every detail was perfect. She'd learned early in her career that appearance mattered, perhaps more than it should, but she'd adapted. Her grandmother had always said, "You have to be twice as good to get half as much." And Sarah had lived by those words. The next morning, as she made her way through O'Hare International Airport, Sarah felt a mixture of nervous energy and pride. The first-class check-in counter was notably quieter and more elegant than the main terminal. The agent, a middle-aged white woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning. How may I help you?" "I'm checking in for Flight 447 to Los Angeles," Sarah said, sliding her ID and confirmation across the counter. The agent's smile faltered slightly as she looked at the documents, then at Sarah, then back at the documents. "Is there an error here? I'm sorry?" Sarah maintained her professional composure, though she felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. "It shows first class, but—" The agent trailed off, typing something into her computer, with more force than seemed necessary. "But what?" Sarah's voice remained steady, but she could feel her jaw tightening. "Well, I just want to make sure there hasn't been a mistake. These tickets are quite expensive." Sarah felt the familiar sting of assumption, the presumption that she didn't belong in spaces of privilege. She'd experienced it countless times, in restaurants, department stores, even at her own law firm during her first weeks there. "There's no mistake," Sarah said firmly. "The ticket was purchased by Morrison & Associates for business travel." The agent continued typing, her expression growing more skeptical by the moment. "I'll need to verify this with the company. You'll—" "Need to what?" Sarah's professional mask slipped slightly. She was aware of other passengers beginning to stare, and she felt heat rising to her cheeks. "It's just protocol," the agent said, not meeting Sarah's eyes. "For expensive tickets, we sometimes need additional verification." Sarah knew this wasn't protocol. In all her years of business travel, even in coach, she'd never been asked for additional verification when her company had purchased tickets. She pulled out her phone, ready to call Morrison & Associates, but then stopped. She had a confirmation number, valid identification, and every right to be there. She wasn't going to beg for what was rightfully hers. "I'd like to speak with a supervisor," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority she'd learned to project in boardrooms full of men who initially dismissed her. The agent's face flushed. "That won't be necessary. Let me just—" She clicked a few more keys with obvious reluctance. "Here's your boarding pass. Gate B7. Boarding begins in 45 minutes. As Sarah walked away, she could feel eyes following her. The encounter had rattled her more than she cared to admit. But she pushed the feelings aside. She had a job to do, a client to represent, and a career to protect. Whatever happened on this trip, she was determined to handle it with the grace and professionalism that had brought her this far. But as she settled into the departure lounge, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Sarah found her seat in first class and settled in, trying to push away the lingering discomfort from the check-in counter. The cabin was spacious and elegant, with wide leather seats that reclined almost flat. She'd never experienced anything like it, and despite everything, she felt a spark of excitement. As she arranged her belongings, Sarah noticed the other first-class passengers boarding. Most were older, well-dressed business travelers who moved with the casual confidence of people accustomed to luxury. A few nodded politely in her direction, but most seemed absorbed in their phones or laptops. She pulled out her own laptop and began reviewing the contract details one final time. The Henderson merger was complex, involving multiple subsidiaries and international holdings. She needed to be sharp for tomorrow's meeting. "Excuse me." Sarah looked up to find a flight attendant standing beside her seat. The woman appeared to be in her 40s with short auburn hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her name tag read, "Jennifer White." "Yes?" Sarah closed her laptop and gave the attendant her full attention. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass," Jennifer said, her voice carrying an undertone that Sarah found immediately concerning. Sarah frowned. "Is there a problem? I just sat down." "I just need to verify that you're in the right seat," Jennifer replied, holding out her hand expectantly. Sarah felt that familiar knot in her stomach tighten, but she maintained her composure. "Of course." She retrieved her boarding pass from her purse and handed it over. Jennifer examined it carefully, turning it over as if looking for some hidden flaw. "This says seat 2A. "Yes, that's where I'm sitting." Sarah's patience was beginning to wear thin, but she kept her voice level. Jennifer continued to study the boarding pass with theatrical skepticism. "I'm going to need to check this against our manifest." "I'm sorry, but why?" Sarah asked, aware that other passengers were beginning to take notice. "I've shown you my boarding pass, which clearly matches my seat assignment. What seems to be the problem?" Jennifer's smile became even more strained. "Sometimes there are discrepancies. I just want to make sure everything is in order." Sarah glanced around and noticed that Jennifer hadn't asked to see anyone else's boarding pass. The elderly white man across the aisle had boarded without any such scrutiny, as had the young white woman 2 rows behind her. "I'd appreciate it if you could be more specific about what discrepancy you think there might be," Sarah said, her attorney instincts kicking in. She'd learned long ago that vague accusations were often masks for discrimination. Jennifer's composure slipped slightly. "Look, ma'am, I'm just trying to do my job here. Sometimes people end up in seats they haven't paid for, and it's my responsibility to make sure everyone is where they're supposed to be." The implication was clear, and Sarah felt her temperature rising, but she also recognized the precarious position she was in. Making a scene on an airplane could have serious consequences, both legally and professionally. Morrison and Associates had specifically chosen her to represent the firm on this trip, and she couldn't afford any negative publicity. "I understand you're doing your job," Sarah replied carefully, "but I'm a business traveler. This ticket was purchased by my law firm, and I have every right to be in this seat. So unless you can explain to me exactly what discrepancy you've identified, I'd prefer to prepare for takeoff." Jennifer's face reddened. "I'll be right back," she said curtly, then walked toward the front of the cabin with Sarah's boarding pass. Still in her hand, Sarah took a deep breath, trying to center herself. Around her, she could feel the curious glances of other passengers. Some seemed sympathetic, others appeared uncomfortable with the tension, and a few looked openly judgmental. She recognized the dynamics at play. She was being made into a spectacle, forced to prove her worthiness for a space she had legitimately purchased. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Hope you're enjoying the first-class treatment. Send pics." Sarah stared at the message, wondering how to respond. The first-class treatment she was receiving wasn't exactly what her friend had in mind. Jennifer returned a few minutes later, accompanied by another flight attendant, an older man whose name tag identified him as David Miller. Both approached Sarah's seat with serious expressions. "Ma'am," David began, his tone official, "we've reviewed our records, and there seems to be some confusion about your seating assignment." "What kind of confusion?" Sarah asked, her legal training compelling her to seek specifics. "Well," Jennifer interjected, "we have you listed for a seat in coach. We think there might have been an error when your boarding pass was printed." Sarah felt a surge of anger, but forced herself to remain calm. "I'd like to see this manifest you're referring to, because my boarding pass clearly shows seat 2A, first class." David shifted uncomfortably. "We can't show passenger information to other travelers, but we're confident there's been a mistake. Then I'd like you to call Morrison and Associates, the law firm that purchased this ticket, to verify the booking," Sarah said firmly. "The number is on my confirmation email." "That won't be necessary," Jennifer said quickly. "We can sort this out simply by having you move to your correct seat in coach. We'll make sure you're comfortable there." "Absolutely not." Sarah's voice carried the authority she used in courtrooms. "I am not moving anywhere until you can show me legitimate proof that I'm not supposed to be in this seat. And if you continue to harass me without cause, I'll have no choice but to file a complaint with both the airline and the Department of Transportation." The mention of official complaint seemed to give both flight attendants pause. David whispered something to Jennifer, who shook her head stubbornly. "Ma'am," David tried again, "we're just trying to resolve this as quickly as possible so we can take off on time." "The quickest resolution," Sarah replied evenly, "would be for you to return my boarding pass and allow me to remain in the seat I legitimately purchased." By now, the confrontation had drawn the attention of nearly every passenger in first class. Sarah was acutely aware that she was being forced to fight for basic dignity in front of an audience, a position she'd hoped never to be in again. An older, black man seated near the back of first class stood up and walked toward them. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying quiet authority. "I couldn't help but notice the commotion. Is there a problem here?" Jennifer turned toward him with visible irritation. "Sir, please return to your seat. This doesn't concern you." "Actually," the man replied calmly, "as a passenger on this flight, I think it does concern me, especially when I see a fellow traveler being treated unfairly." He extended his hand to Sarah. "I'm Judge William Davis." Sarah felt a wave of relief at having an ally, and such a distinguished one. "Sarah Johnson. I'm an attorney with Morrison and Associates." Judge Davis nodded, then turned back to the flight attendants. "Now, what exactly seems to be the problem with Ms. Johnson's seating?" The presence of a federal judge clearly made both flight attendants nervous. David cleared his throat. "We were just verifying her seat assignment, Your Honor." "I see. And have you verified the seat assignments of other first-class passengers with the same thoroughness?" Judge Davis's question hung in the air like a challenge. The flight attendants exchanged glances, but said nothing. "I thought not," Judge Davis continued. "Perhaps it would be best if you returned Ms. Johnson's boarding pass and allowed us all to prepare for takeoff." Reluctantly, Jennifer handed Sarah's boarding pass back to her. "We apologize for any inconvenience," she said through gritted teeth. As the flight attendants retreated, Judge Davis turned to Sarah with a kind smile. "Don't let them steal your first joy, young lady. You belong exactly where you are." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, touched by the kindness of a stranger. "Thank you, Judge Davis. I appreciate you speaking up." "We have to look out for each other," he replied simply. "Now, let's both try to enjoy this flight." As the plane finally began to taxi, Sarah tried to settle back into her seat, but the confrontation had shaken her, more than she wanted to admit, and she couldn't help wondering what other challenges might await her on this trip. The plane had been airborne for less than an hour when Jennifer appeared at Sarah's seat again, this time carrying a clipboard and wearing an expression of barely concealed hostility. "Ms. Johnson," she said, her voice dripping with false politeness, "I need to inform you that we've received a complaint from another passenger about the disturbance earlier." Sarah looked up from her laptop, where she'd been trying to focus on her case files despite the lingering tension. "What kind of complaint?" "They felt uncomfortable with the confrontational nature of your behavior during boarding." Jennifer's smile was razor thin. "As you know, we take passenger comfort very seriously." Sarah felt her blood pressure rising. "Confrontational behavior? I was defending my right to sit in a seat I legitimately purchased. That's hardly confrontational." "Nevertheless," Jennifer continued, "I'm going to have to ask you to keep any future discussions at a lower volume. Some passengers are trying to rest." Sarah glanced around the cabin. Most passengers were reading, working on laptops, or watching movies on their personal screens. The cabin was actually quite quiet, and she realized that Jennifer was manufacturing another reason to single her out. "I haven't spoken above a normal conversational volume since we took off," Sarah replied evenly. "In fact, I haven't spoken to anyone except you." Jennifer's jaw tightened. "I'm just asking for your cooperation, ma'am." "And I'm just asking to be treated like every other passenger on this flight," Sarah shot back, her patience finally wearing thin. "Which apparently is too much to ask." From across the aisle, Judge Davis cleared his throat. "Excuse me, miss," he called to Jennifer. "I've been sitting right here the entire flight, and I can assure you that Ms. Johnson has been nothing but professional and quiet." "Perhaps you could direct your attention to more pressing matters?" Jennifer's face flushed red. "Sir, I'm handling a legitimate passenger concern." "What you're doing," Judge Davis interrupted calmly, "is harassment, and if it continues, I'll be filing my own complaint with the airline, the FAA, and possibly the Department of Justice." The mention of federal agencies seemed to drain the color from Jennifer's face. She mumbled something about checking on other passengers and hurried away. Sarah let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you again, Judge Davis. I'm starting to feel like I have a guardian angel on this flight." Judge Davis chuckled softly. "I've been flying for 30 years, and I've seen this kind of treatment too many times. Sometimes people need to be reminded that discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's illegal." "I keep telling myself not to let it get to me," Sarah admitted. "But it's hard when you're just trying to do your job and people keep questioning whether you belong." "I understand completely," Judge Davis replied. "I've been a federal judge for 15 years, and I still get questioned when I walk into certain courtrooms. But you know what I've learned? Their discomfort with your presence says everything about them and nothing about you." Sarah nodded, finding comfort in his words. They chatted quietly for a few more minutes about their careers, and she learned that Judge Davis was traveling to Los Angeles for a judicial conference. His calm wisdom and shared experiences helped her feel less alone. About an hour later, as lunch service began, Sarah noticed that every first-class passenger around her was served promptly except her. She watched as the other flight attendant, David, distributed meals to the passengers in front of and behind her, somehow managing to skip over her entirely. When he returned to the galley without offering her anything, Sarah pressed her call button. Jennifer appeared almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Yes?" Jennifer asked with exaggerated weariness. "I haven't been offered lunch yet," Sarah said politely. "Could I get a meal, please?" Jennifer made a show of checking her clipboard. "Let me see. What's your seat number again?" "Kyo A. The same seat I've been in since we boarded." I don't see you on the meal service list," Jennifer said with mock concern. "Are you sure you ordered a special meal? Sometimes coach passengers who get upgraded at the last minute miss the meal service cutoff." Sarah felt her temper flare. "I wasn't upgraded. I have a first-class ticket that was purchased a week ago, and I didn't order any special meal. I assumed I'd receive the standard first-class service." "Well, let me check our inventory," Jennifer said. Disappearing into the galley for several minutes, Judge Davis leaned over. "This is absolutely ridiculous," he said quietly. "I've never seen anything like this." When Jennifer returned, she was carrying a small bag and a bottle of water. "I'm sorry, but we've run out of first-class meals. This is a snack from Coach. It's all we have left." Sarah looked at the bag, which contained a small packet of crackers and some cheese. She glanced around and could see that several first-class passengers were still eating their full meals, suggesting that Jennifer was lying about the inventory. "I'd like to speak with the captain," Sarah said firmly. Jennifer's eyes widened. "The captain is busy flying the plane, ma'am. I can't disturb him for meal service issues." "Then I'd like to speak with the senior flight attendant, or whoever is in charge of passenger services on this flight." "That would be me," Jennifer replied smugly. "And I've explained the situation. Sometimes these things happen." Judge Davis stood up, his tall frame and authoritative presence commanding immediate attention. "Young lady," he said to Jennifer, his voice carrying decades of courtroom authority, "I've been practicing law for over 40 years, and I can recognize discrimination when I see it. What's happening here is not, sometimes these things happen. It's a deliberate pattern of harassment based on race, and it's illegal under federal law." Jennifer's smugness evaporated. "Sir, I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating clearly that you have treated Ms. Johnson differently from every other first-class passenger on this flight, from the moment she boarded until now. You questioned her boarding pass without cause, accused her of causing disturbances she didn't cause, and now you're denying her the same meal service provided to every other passenger in this cabin." Other passengers were now openly watching the confrontation. Sarah noticed an elderly white woman nodding in agreement with Judge Davis's words, while a younger businessman was recording the interaction on his phone. Furthermore, Judge Davis continued, "I am a federal judge, and I will be documenting every aspect of this incident. This airline will be hearing from both the Department of Transportation and my colleagues on the federal bench." Jennifer looked around desperately, perhaps hoping for support from David, but he was nowhere to be seen. I'll check on that meal again," she stammered. "You'll do more than that," Judge Davis replied. "You'll provide Ms. Johnson with the same quality service offered to every other passenger, and you'll do it with the respect and professionalism that should characterize your position." Minutes later, Jennifer returned with a full first-class meal and a visibly forced smile. "Here you are, Ms. Johnson. My apologies for the confusion." Sarah accepted the meal graciously, though the entire situation had left her appetite diminished. As Jennifer walked away, she felt a mixture of gratitude for Judge Davis's intervention and frustration that such intervention had been necessary. "I can't thank you enough," she said to Judge Davis, "but I hate that you had to intervene. I hate that I couldn't handle this on my own." "You were handling it perfectly," Judge Davis assured her. "But sometimes we need allies. There's no shame in accepting help when fighting injustice." As Sarah picked at her meal, she couldn't help but wonder what awaited her in Los Angeles. If this was how she was treated at 30,000 feet, what would happen when she walked into high stakes? Business meetings as the lead attorney on a $50 million deal? But Judge Davis's words echoed in her mind. "Their discomfort with your presence says everything about them and nothing about you." She would remember that no matter what. Challenges lay ahead. 2 hours into the flight, just as Sarah was finally beginning to relax and focus on her case preparation, she noticed Jennifer approaching her seat once again. This time, the flight attendant was accompanied by a tall man in a crisp pilot's uniform with 4 stripes on his shoulders. The captain. "Ms. Johnson?" The captain's voice was professional but carried an undertone of concern. "I'm Captain Michael Davis. I wonder if I could speak with you for a moment." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. Being singled out by the captain couldn't be good news. "Of course, Captain. Is there a problem?" Captain Davis glanced at Jennifer, then back to Sarah. "I've received some reports about incidents during this flight. I'd like to hear your side of the story." Sarah noticed that other passengers were once again turning to watch the unfolding drama. She felt exposed and vulnerable, aware that every word and gesture was being scrutinized by strangers. "I'm not sure what reports you're referring to, Captain," Sarah replied carefully. "I've been sitting quietly in my assigned seat, working on legal documents for a business meeting. The only incidents I'm aware of involved questions about my right to be in first class and difficulties receiving basics passenger services." Captain Davis nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And you're certain you purchased a first-class ticket?" Sarah felt a familiar surge of frustration, but kept her voice level. "Captain, I've already shown my boarding pass multiple times. The ticket was purchased by Morrison & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms, for a business trip. I can provide you with my company's contact information if you need verification." "That won't be necessary," Judge Davis interjected from across the aisle. "Captain, I'm Federal Judge William Davis, no relation, and I've witnessed the treatment Ms. Johnson has received throughout this flight. She has been professional and courteous, despite being subjected to what can only be described as discriminatory harassment." Captain Davis's expression shifted as he recognized the gravity of having a federal judge as a witness. "Judge Davis, I appreciate your input. I'm trying to understand what happened so I can address any legitimate concerns." "The legitimate concern," Judge Davis replied firmly, "is that your flight attendant has singled out Ms. Johnson for treatment that no other first-class passenger has received. She's been questioned about her ticket, accused of causing disturbances she didn't cause, and denied meal service that was readily available to other passengers." Jennifer's face had gone pale during this exchange. "Captain, I was just following standard procedures." "Standard procedures?" Judge Davis interrupted. "Did you question any other passenger's boarding pass? Did you ask anyone else to prove they belonged in first class? Did you tell any other passenger that meals weren't available?" Jennifer opened and closed her mouth. like a fish out of water, unable to provide answers that wouldn't incriminate her further. Captain Davis turned back to Sarah, his expression apologetic. "Ms. Johnson, I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience you've experienced. This is not the level of service we strive to provide, and it certainly doesn't reflect the values of our airline." "I appreciate your apology, Captain," Sarah replied. "But I have to ask, what steps will be taken to ensure this doesn't happen to other passengers?" It was a fair question, and Captain Davis seemed to recognize its importance. "Ms. White will be receiving additional training on our non-discrimination policies," he said, glancing sternly at Jennifer. "And I'll be filing a full incident report. When we land—" Jennifer looked stricken. "Captain, I never intended—" "Your intentions are irrelevant," Captain Davis cut her off. "The impact of your actions is what matters, and the impact has been to make a paying customer feel unwelcome and discriminated against." He turned back to Sarah. "Is there anything I can do to make the remainder of your flight more comfortable?" Sarah considered the question. Part of her wanted to demand that Jennifer be removed from service entirely, but she also recognized that the woman likely had bills to pay and possibly a family to support. "I just want to complete my flight in peace so I can prepare for an important business meeting tomorrow." "You'll have that," Captain Davis assured her. "Ms. White will be handling other sections of the cabin for the remainder of the flight." As the captain and Jennifer walked away, Sarah noticed that the atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted. The passenger who'd been recording the interaction gave her a supportive nod. The elderly woman across the aisle offered a sympathetic smile. Even the businessman who'd seemed judgmental earlier appeared to regard her with newfound respect. "How are you holding up?" Judge Davis asked quietly. "Honestly, I'm exhausted," Sarah admitted. "I shouldn't have to use this much emotional energy just to exist in a space I pay to occupy." "You're absolutely right," Judge Davis agreed. "But I hope you'll take some pride in how you handled yourself. You remained professional and dignified in the face of treatment that would have broken a lesser person's composure." Sarah managed a small smile. "My grandmother always told me that how we respond to adversity reveals our character." Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She raised me after my parents died, and she always emphasized education and perseverance. She worked 2 jobs to help pay for my college, even though she never made it past 8th grade herself. Judge Davis nodded approvingly. "Those are the stories that matter. The sacrifices of previous generations that enable us to break barriers." For even the first time since boarding, Sarah felt truly relaxed. She found herself sharing more about her background, her journey through law school, and her hopes for the Henderson case. Judge Davis reciprocated with stories from his own career, including challenges he'd faced as one of the first black judges in his district. "You know," Judge Davis said as they began their descent into Los Angeles, "I'd like you to have my card. Not because I think you'll need legal help, you're clearly capable of handling yourself, but because I believe in networking and supporting other professionals who share our experiences." Sarah accepted the card gratefully. "Thank you, Judge Davis, for everything. I don't know how this flight would have gone without your support." "That's what community is for," he replied. "We lift each other up." As the plane touched down at LAX, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The flight had been more challenging than she'd expected, but she'd emerged with her dignity intact and a new ally in Judge Davis. More importantly, she'd been reminded of her own strength and resilience. Jennifer was notably absent during the deplaning process, but Captain Davis made a point of stopping by Sarah's seat before she disembarked. "Ms. Johnson, I want you to know that I've already begun the process of filing an incident report. You should receive a follow-up from our customer service department within the next few days." "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate your professionalism in handling this situation. It's the least I could do. And Ms. Johnson, good luck with your business meeting tomorrow. I have a feeling you're going to do great." As Sarah walked through the jet bridge into LAX, she felt ready to take on whatever challenges awaited her. The flight had been a trial by fire, but she'd proven to herself that she could handle adversity with grace and strength. Tomorrow would bring the Henderson meeting and the culmination of 6 months of hard work. Whatever happened, she was ready. The car service that Morrison and Associates had arranged was waiting for Sarah as she exited the baggage claim area. The driver, a middle-aged Latino man named Carlos, greeted her with a warm smile that was a welcome contrast to her flight experience. "Miss Johnson? I'm Carlos Martinez from Executive Transportation. Welcome to Los Angeles." "Thank you, Carlos. It's good to be here," Sarah replied, though she wasn't entirely sure she meant it yet. As they drove through the sun-drenched streets of Los Angeles toward her hotel, Carlos proved to be an excellent conversationalist. He'd been driving corporate clients for 15 years and had fascinating insights about the city's business culture. "You're here for the Henderson deal, right?" Carlos asked as they navigated the afternoon traffic. "Word gets around in this business. That's a big one. Lots of important people flying in for tomorrow's meeting." Sarah was impressed by his knowledge. "You seem to know more about corporate mergers than most business journalists," Carlos laughed. "When you drive executives around all day, you pick things up. Plus, my daughter just graduated from UCLA Business School, so she keeps me informed about these major deals." "That's wonderful. You must be very proud." "Extremely proud. She's actually interviewing with some of the firms involved in your deal, following in the family business in a way, just from the inside instead of driving people around." Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation. After the stress of the flight, Carlos's easy warmth was exactly what she needed. The Beverly Hills Hotel was even more impressive than she'd imagined. As they pulled up to the iconic pink palace, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She'd stayed in nice hotels before, but never anything quite this luxurious. "Miss Johnson," Carlos said, as he helped her with her bags, "I'll be driving you to your meeting tomorrow morning. Pickup is at 8:30 a.m. sharp, right here in front of the hotel?" "Perfect. Thank you, Carlos. I'll see you in the morning." The hotel lobby was a study in old Hollywood glamour, with lush tropical plants and elegant furnishings. Sarah approached the check-in desk with confidence, determined not to let her flight experience affect her expectations. The desk clerk, a polished young woman with perfectly styled hair, looked up with a professional smile. "Good afternoon. How may I help you?" "I'm checking in. Sarah Johnson with Morrison and Associates." The clerk's fingers flew over her keyboard. "Ah, yes, Miss Johnson. We have you in our executive suite on the 7th floor. Your firm has arranged for all charges to be billed directly to them." Sarah felt a wave of relief. No questions, no skeptical looks, just professional service. "That sounds perfect. Here are your key cards, and let me tell you about our amenities." The clerk provided a thorough overview of the hotel's facilities, from the spa to the business center, treating Sarah with the same courtesy she observed being extended to other guests. The suite was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Los Angeles, and the furnishings were elegant without being ostentatious. Sarah set her laptop up at the desk and spread out her case files, determined to make the most of her remaining preparation time. As she reviewed the Henderson contracts one final time, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Morrison and Associates. "Sarah, it's Bob Morrison. How was your flight?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It was, educational, Mr. Morrison. I'm at the hotel now and ready for tomorrow's meeting." "Excellent. I wanted to call and emphasize again how much confidence the firm has in you. The Hendersons specifically requested that you handle this phase of the negotiation. That's a rare show of client confidence in someone at your level." "I appreciate that, Mr. Morrison. I won't let you down." "I know you won't. Also, I have some good news. The senior partners have been discussing your performance on this case, and there's strong sentiment for fast-tracking your consideration for partner." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. "Partner? Mr. Morrison? I've only been with the firm for 3 years." "And in those 3 years, you've brought in more new business than some associates do in a decade. Your work on the Henderson case has been exemplary, and your client relationships are stronger than many of our senior associates. Age and tenure matter, but results matter more. Sarah felt her heart racing. Partnership at Morrison & Associates was something she'd dreamed about, but hadn't expected to be possible for at least another 5 years. Mr. Morrison, I'm honored that you'd even consider me. The consideration is well earned, Sarah. Close. This deal tomorrow, and we'll make it official when you return to Chicago. After hanging up, Sarah sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Partnership. At 28 years old, she'd be one of the youngest partners in the firm's history. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Education is the one thing they can never take away from you. She spent the next few hours reviewing every detail of the Henderson merger, making notes and preparing responses to potential objections. The contracts were complex, involving international subsidiaries and intricate tax implications, but Sarah felt confident in her mastery of every aspect. As evening approached, she decided to take a break and explore the hotel's amenities. The rooftop pool area offered stunning views of the Hollywood Hills, and she found herself a quiet corner where she could continue working while enjoying the California sunshine. "Excuse me, are you Sarah Johnson?" Sarah looked up to see a tall, elegant woman approaching her table. She appeared to be in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested executive leadership. "Yes, I am. I'm sorry. Have we met?" "Not yet, but I know your work by reputation. I'm Margaret Henderson, CEO of Henderson Industries." Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized the name of her client. She immediately stood and extended her hand. "Miss Henderson, what a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to meet you until tomorrow's signing ceremony." Margaret Henderson smiled warmly. "I was having drinks with colleagues downstairs when someone mentioned that Morrison's lead attorney was staying at the hotel. I hoped I might run into you." "I'm honored to meet you, Miss Henderson. Your company's growth over the past decade has been remarkable. Please call me Margaret. And thank you, though, I have to say, the legal work on this merger has been the most impressive I've seen in 25 years of business. Your attention to detail and creative problem-solving saved us months of additional negotiations." Sarah felt a warm glow of professional satisfaction. "That's very kind of you to say. The merger presented some interesting challenges, but that's what makes the work rewarding." Margaret gestured to the empty chair across from Sarah. "Mind if I join you for a few minutes? I'd love to hear more about your background." As they talked, Sarah learned that Margaret Henderson had built her company from a small family business into a multi-million-dollar enterprise over the course of 2 decades. Her story was one of perseverance, innovation, and strategic risk-taking. "You know," Margaret said after they'd been talking for nearly an hour, "I make it a point to work only with attorneys who share my values. When I researched Morrison and Associates, your name kept coming up as someone who combines legal excellence with genuine integrity. That's why I specifically requested that you handle this deal." "I'm grateful for your confidence in me," Sarah replied. "This case has been the highlight of my career so far." Margaret's expression grew thoughtful. "Can I ask you something personal, Sarah? What drives you? What gets you up in the morning and keeps you working late into the night?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think it's the opportunity to solve complex problems and help businesses grow. But on a deeper level, it's about proving that excellence doesn't have a particular look or background. My grandmother always told me that I'd have to work twice, as hard to get half as much, but she also taught me that hard work and education could open any door." Margaret nodded approvingly. "Your grandmother sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was. She passed away 2 years ago, but her influence shapes everything I do." "She'd be very proud of what you've accomplished," Margaret said softly. "And she'd be even prouder of the person you've become in the process. They were interrupted by Margaret's phone ringing. After a brief conversation, she stood to leave. "I have to run to another meeting, but I wanted you to know how much I'm looking forward to tomorrow. This merger represents a new chapter for Henderson Industries, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather have guiding us through it." After Margaret left, Sarah remained by the pool for another hour, watching the sun set over Los Angeles. The conversation had filled her with confidence and renewed energy. Here was a successful businesswoman who had specifically sought her out. Based on her reputation and work quality, the contrast with her flight experience couldn't have been starker. On the plane, she'd been questioned and doubted based on assumptions and prejudices. Here she was being recognized and valued for her actual contributions and capabilities. As she returned to her suite to make final preparations for tomorrow's meeting, Sarah felt a sense of anticipation rather than nervousness. She'd worked hard for this opportunity, and she was ready to seize it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "How's LA treating you? Ready to close your big deal?" Sarah smiled as she typed back, "Better than expected. Tomorrow's going to be amazing." And for the first time since leaving Chicago, she truly believed it. Sarah arrived at the Henderson Industries headquarters 30 minutes early, wanting to ensure she had time to settle in and review her materials one final time. The building was a stunning example of modern architecture, with glass facades that reflected the morning Los Angeles sun and created an impression of transparency and openness. Carlos had been punctual as promised, and during the drive, he'd shared some final insights about navigating Los Angeles business culture. "Remember," he'd said, as they pulled up to the building, "confidence is everything here. You belong in that room as much as anyone else." The reception area was elegant and professional, with contemporary art on the walls and comfortable seating, areas where several other business professionals were already waiting. Sarah approached the reception desk with her head high and shoulders back. "Good morning. I'm Sarah Johnson from Morrison & Associates, here for the Henderson merger signing." The receptionist, a young man with an enthusiastic smile, looked up from his computer. "Miss Johnson, we've been expecting you. Miss Henderson asked me to escort you to the conference room personally when you arrived." As they walked through these building's corridors, Sarah noticed the energy and activity that marked a successful growing company. Employees moved with purpose, and the office spaces were designed to encourage collaboration and innovation. "Miss Henderson speaks very highly of your work," the receptionist mentioned as they approached the conference room. "She told everyone that Morrison & Associates sent their best attorney for this deal." Sarah felt a surge of pride and confidence. This was the reception she'd hoped for, recognition based on her professional reputation rather than assumptions. About her appearance, the conference room was impressive, with a large mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of downtown Los Angeles. Several people were already seated, including Margaret Henderson, who stood immediately when Sarah entered. "Sarah, I'm so glad you're here." Margaret's greeting was warm and professional. "Let me introduce you to the team." Sarah was introduced to Henderson Industries' executive team, including the CFO, general counsel, and several department heads. Each greeting was courteous and respectful, and Sarah could sense that Margaret had clearly communicated her confidence in Sarah's abilities. "And these are our partners from Whitman & Associates," Margaret continued, gesturing to 3 attorneys seated at the far end of the table. "They've been handling the due diligence on the acquiring company's side." The lead attorney from Whitman & Associates, a man in his 50s named Richard Whitman, stood to shake Sarah's hand. His greeting was polite but carried an undertone that Sarah found familiar, the subtle skepticism of someone who hadn't expected Morrison & Associates to send a young black woman as their lead counsel. "Miss Johnson," Richard said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I have to admit I was expecting someone more senior from Morrison & Associates for a deal of this magnitude." Sarah had encountered this reaction countless times throughout her career, and she'd learned to address it directly, but diplomatically. Mr. Morrison selected me to lead this transaction based on my track record with complex mergers and my familiarity with every aspect of the Henderson acquisition. I'm confident you'll find my work meets the highest professional standards. I'm sure it does, Richard replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page regarding the complexity of these agreements. Margaret. Henderson stepped forward, and Sarah could see a flash of irritation in her eyes. Richard, Miss Johnson has handled every aspect of this merger flawlessly over the past 6 months. Her legal analysis has been thorough, her negotiations have been fair but firm, and her attention to detail has caught several issues that could have created problems down the road. Richard's expression shifted as he recognized that his subtle challenge to Sarah's credentials had not been well received by the client. Of course, Margaret. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. Good, Margaret replied firmly, because we have a lot of ground to cover today, and I want to make sure we're focused on the substance rather than personalities. As they settled around the conference table, Sarah laid out her materials with practiced efficiency. She had every document organized and every potential issue flagged with proposed solutions. This was where she excelled, in the detailed, complex work of making deals happen. Before we begin the formal review, Sarah announced, I'd like to address the 3 outstanding issues that were identified in yesterday's final review. She proceeded to outline each issue clearly and concisely, providing legal analysis and proposed resolutions for problems that could have derailed the entire transaction. Her presentation was polished, thorough, and demonstrated complete mastery of the material. Richard Whitman's skeptical expression gradually gave way to one of professional respect. By the time Sarah had finished addressing the outstanding issues, he was taking notes and nodding approvingly at her proposed solutions. That's excellent work, Miss Johnson, he admitted. Your analysis of the tax implications in Section 12 is particularly sophisticated. Thank you, Sarah replied graciously. I believe we can resolve all these issues within the framework we've established, which should allow us to complete the signing as scheduled. For the next 4 hours, Sarah guided the group through every aspect of the merger agreement. She fielded questions with confidence, provided clarification on complex legal language, and negotiated final adjustments with skill and professionalism. Margaret Henderson watched the proceedings with obvious satisfaction, occasionally catching Sarah's eye and nodding approvingly. It was clear that she had made the right choice in insisting that Sarah lead the transaction. As they approached the signature phase of the meeting, Richard Whitman pulled Sarah aside during a brief break. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. My initial reaction was unprofessional, and I'm sorry for that. You're clearly one of the most skilled merger attorneys I've worked with, regardless of experience level. Sarah appreciated the apology, though she'd heard similar words many times before. Thank you, Richard. I understand that this industry can be conservative about change. What matters to me is that we complete this transaction successfully for our clients. Absolutely, and I want you to know that I'll be recommending you to colleagues for future deals. Your work today has been exemplary. When they reconvened for the final signing ceremony, the atmosphere in the room had completely transformed. What had begun with subtle skepticism had evolved into genuine professional respect and admiration for Sarah's capabilities. Margaret Henderson stood to address the group before the formal signing began. I want to thank everyone who contributed to making this merger possible, but I especially want to recognize Sarah Johnson from Morrison & Associates. Her legal expertise, attention to detail, and commitment to excellence have been instrumental in bringing us to this moment. The room erupted in polite applause, and Sarah felt a deep sense of professional satisfaction. This was what she'd worked for, recognition based on merit, competence, and results. As the executives signed the final documents officially completing the $50 million merger, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From her grandmother's sacrifices to her own years of education and hard work, every step had led to this conference room in Los Angeles. Margaret Henderson was the last to sign, and as she set down her pen, she looked directly at Sarah. "Congratulations, Counselor. This has been a masterpiece of legal work." As the meeting concluded and people began to file out of the conference room, Sarah packed up her materials with a sense of accomplishment that went beyond professional success. She had not only closed the biggest deal of her career, but had done so with dignity and excellence, proving once again that her grandmother's faith in education and perseverance had been well-placed. Margaret Henderson approached her as she finished organizing her files. "Sarah, I hope this is just the beginning of our professional relationship. Henderson Industries will be growing significantly over the next few years and will need legal counsel we can trust. I'd be honored to continue working with you and your team," Sarah replied. "Thank you for your confidence in me throughout this process." As she left the Henderson Industries building, Sarah felt like she was walking on air. The meeting had exceeded every expectation, and she knew that this success would open doors to even greater opportunities. Carlos was waiting with the car to take her back to the hotel, and his broad smile suggested that good news traveled fast. In the Los Angeles business community, "Congratulations, Miss Johnson. Word is already getting around that you just closed one of the biggest deals of the year." Sarah smiled as she settled into the back seat. "It feels pretty good, Carlos. It feels pretty good indeed." Back at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Sarah felt like she was floating. The Henderson merger had gone better than she could have possibly imagined, and the professional recognition she'd received from both clients and opposing counsel filled her with a deep sense of validation. She decided to treat herself to lunch at the hotel's famous Polo Lounge. A decision that would have seemed extravagant just a few days ago, but now felt appropriate given her success. As she was escorted to a table on the garden patio, she couldn't help but notice how different this experience was from her flight to Los Angeles. The maitre d', an elegant older gentleman named Philippe, treated her with the same courtesy and respect he showed to all patrons. The waitstaff was professional and attentive without being intrusive. This was how service should be, based on the quality of the establishment and the dignity of all patrons, not on assumptions about who belonged. As she reviewed the menu, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Judge Davis. "I hope your business meeting went well. I've been thinking about our conversation on the flight and wanted you to know that I filed a detailed report with the airline about the discriminatory treatment you received. Change happens one complaint at a time." Sarah smiled as she typed back. "Meeting went better than I could have hoped. Thank you again for your support on the flight. Your intervention made all the difference." She was settling into her meal when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Morrison and Associates, and Sarah's heart began to race as she realized it was probably Mr. Morrison calling for a report on the Henderson signing. "Sarah, tell me everything. How did it go?" "Mr. Morrison, it went perfectly. The signing is complete, all outstanding issues were resolved, and Margaret Henderson specifically praised the firm's work on the deal." "Outstanding. I knew you were the right choice for this transaction. The partners are going to be thrilled." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then decided to share more details. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, I think this deal could lead to a significant ongoing relationship with Henderson Industries. Margaret mentioned that they're planning substantial growth over the next few years and will need continued legal support." "That's exactly what I was hoping to hear." "Sarah, when you return to Chicago tomorrow, I want to schedule a meeting with you and the senior partners. We have some important things to discuss regarding your future with the firm." After ending the call, Sarah allowed herself a moment of pure satisfaction. Everything was falling into place exactly as she'd hoped. The partnership track that had seemed like a distant dream was now within reach, and she'd proven herself capable of handling the firm's most important clients. Her peaceful lunch was interrupted when she noticed a familiar figure approaching her table. It was Jennifer White, the flight attendant from yesterday's flight, dressed in civilian clothes and looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Oh, Miss Johnson, I wondered if I could speak with you for a moment." Sarah's initial impulse was to decline, but her innate sense of fairness and curiosity won out. "Of course. Please, have a seat." Jennifer sat down hesitantly, clearly struggling with what she wanted to say. "I want to apologize for my behavior yesterday. It was unprofessional and inappropriate, and I'm deeply sorry." Sarah studied the woman's face, trying to gauge her sincerity. "I appreciate your apology, Jennifer. Can I ask what prompted you to seek me out?" Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I was suspended pending an investigation into the incident. Captain Davis filed a report, and the airline takes discrimination complaints very seriously. I realized that I let my own prejudices affect how I treated you, and that's inexcusable." "What prejudices?" Sarah asked quietly. Jennifer wiped her eyes with a napkin. "I grew up in a small town where there weren't many black families, and I absorbed attitudes that I thought I'd left behind. When I saw you in first class, I made assumptions about whether you belonged there based on nothing but your race. I'm ashamed of that." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of her was still angry about the treatment she'd received, but another part appreciated Jennifer's willingness to confront her own biases. "Jennifer, I appreciate your honesty and your apology. The treatment I received was hurtful and wrong, but I also believe people can change and grow." "I don't expect forgiveness," Jennifer continued, "but I wanted you to know that this experience has forced me to examine my own attitudes and behavior. I've enrolled in diversity training courses, and I'm committed to doing better." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That's important work, and I'm glad you're doing it, but I also want you to understand the impact your actions had. I was traveling for one of the most important business meetings of my career, and your treatment made me question my worth and my place in professional spaces. That's not just about one flight. It's about the message that gets sent when people like me are constantly questioned and challenged." "I understand," Jennifer replied quietly, "and I'm truly sorry for my part in perpetuating that treatment." They sat in silence for a moment before Sarah spoke again. "I hope your training helps. You recognize that treating people with dignity and respect isn't just good customer service, it's basic human decency." Jennifer nodded and stood to leave. "Thank you for taking the time to speak with me, Miss Johnson. I know I didn't deserve your courtesy, but I'm grateful for it." After Jennifer left, Sarah sat quietly for a while, processing the unexpected encounter. She was struck by the contrast between her flight experience and the day's business meetings. In one context, she'd been judged by superficial characteristics and found wanting. In the other, she'd been evaluated on her professional capabilities and found exceptional. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "How did the big meeting go? I've been thinking about you all day." Sarah smiled as she typed back, "Better than I ever imagined. Partnership, here I come." As she finished her lunch and prepared to return to her suite, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The discrimination she'd faced on the flight was painful and wrong, but it hadn't defined her or limited her success. Her grandmother's words echoed in her memory, "They can't stop you if you don't stop yourself." Tomorrow she would return to Chicago with a completed deal, satisfied clients, and new opportunities on the horizon. The challenges she'd faced had only strengthened her resolve and reminded her of how far she'd come. But perhaps most importantly, she'd been reminded that her success wasn't just personal. It was part of a larger story about breaking barriers and creating opportunities for others who would follow. Judge Davis had been right. Sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination is simply to continue excelling, to prove through your actions that the prejudices of others say nothing about your true worth. As Sarah packed her belongings and prepared for her return flight to Chicago, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction and anticipation. The best was yet to come. The next morning, Sarah arrived at LAX feeling confident and accomplished. The Henderson deal was complete. Her future at Morrison & Associates looked brighter than ever, and she'd proven to herself that she could handle whatever challenges came. Her way with grace and professionalism, Carlos had driven her to the airport one final time, and during the ride, he'd shared the news that his daughter had been offered a position at one of the firms involved in the Henderson merger. "She said your name came up during her interview," Carlos had told her with obvious pride. "Apparently, word has already gotten around about the impressive young attorney who closed the deal." At the airport, Sarah made her way to the first-class check-in counter with none of the apprehension she'd felt 2 days earlier. The agent, a different person from her outbound flight, processed her ticket efficiently and courteously. "Miss Johnson, you're all set. First class, seat 3A. Boarding begins in about 30 minutes. "Thank you," Sarah replied, genuinely appreciating the straightforward professional service. As she waited in the departure lounge, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her arrival in Los Angeles. She'd successfully closed the biggest deal of her career, earned recognition from clients and peers, and was returning to Chicago with partnership prospects that had seemed impossible just days earlier. Her phone buzzed with a message from Margaret Henderson. "Sarah, thank you again for your exceptional work on our merger. I've already recommended you to 2 other companies that are planning significant transactions this year. Your reputation is definitely growing in the LA business community." Sarah smiled as she typed back her thanks. This was how professional relationships were supposed to work, based on competence, results, and mutual respect. When boarding was announced, Sarah gathered her belongings and joined the first-class line. As she approached the gate agent, she noticed the woman's face light up with recognition. "Miss Johnson, I'm Sandra Williams, the gate supervisor. I wanted to personally welcome you aboard today and apologize for any issues you may have experienced on your outbound flight." Sarah was surprised by the acknowledgement. "Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate that. We take all passenger feedback seriously, and we want to ensure that every traveler has a positive experience with our airline. Your return flight crew has been specifically briefed on providing excellent service to all passengers." As Sarah boarded the aircraft, she was greeted by a completely different flight crew than her outbound journey. The head flight attendant, a professional woman named Patricia Johnson, welcomed her warmly. "Miss Johnson, welcome aboard. We're honored to have you flying with us today. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable." Sarah settled into her seat, noting the stark difference in treatment. This was how air travel was supposed to work: professional service based on tickets purchased and seats assigned, not on assumptions about who belonged where. As other passengers boarded, Sarah noticed an elderly black woman being escorted to the seat across the aisle. The woman appeared to be traveling alone and seemed somewhat overwhelmed by the first-class cabin. "First time in first class," the woman confided to Sarah with a nervous smile. "My grandson insisted on upgrading my ticket for my 80th birthday trip." "How wonderful," Sarah replied warmly. "I hope you enjoy every minute of it." As the flight prepared for departure, Sarah watched the flight attendants go through their safety demonstration and begin their pre-flight service. Every passenger was treated with the same level of courtesy and professionalism, regardless of age, race, or apparent background. During takeoff, Sarah struck up a conversation with her elderly seatmate, whose name was Dorothy Washington. Mrs. Washington was returning from a visit with her great-grandchildren and had fascinating stories about her career as a nurse during the civil rights era. "I worked at a hospital in Birmingham during the 1960s, Mrs. Washington shared. "It wasn't easy being a black nurse in those days, but I knew that healing people was my calling, regardless of how some folks treated me." Sarah was captivated by Mrs. Washington's stories of perseverance and dedication in the face of systemic discrimination. "You helped pave the way for people like me," Sarah said gratefully. "Your generation's sacrifices made my opportunities possible." "That's what we hoped for," Mrs. Washington replied with a gentle smile. "We didn't fight those battles for ourselves. We fought them so that young people like you could sit in first class without anyone questioning whether you belonged there." The contrast with Sarah's outbound flight couldn't have been more striking. Instead of discrimination and hostility, she was experiencing the dignity and respect that should be standard for all travelers. The flight attendants were attentive without being intrusive. The service was exemplary, and she was able to focus on her work and enjoy conversations with fellow passengers. Midway through the flight, Patricia approached Sarah's seat with a genuine smile. "Oi, Miss Johnson, the captain asked me to give you his regards. He heard about your successful business meeting in Los Angeles and wanted to congratulate you." Sarah was touched by the gesture. "Please thank the captain for me. This has been a wonderful flight." "We're proud to serve passengers who represent excellence in their fields," Patricia replied. "Your success reflects well on all of us." As they began their descent into Chicago, Mrs. Washington turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "You know, dear, I've been watching you during this flight, and I can tell you're someone special. You carry yourself with confidence and grace, and you treat everyone with kindness. That's how I know you're going to continue succeeding." "Thank you, Mrs. Washington. Your words mean more to me than you know." "Promise me something," the older woman continued. "Promise me that as you climb higher in your career, you'll remember to reach back and help lift others up behind you." "I promise," Sarah replied, and she meant it. The support she'd received from Judge Davis on her outbound flight had reminded her of the importance of community and mutual assistance. As the plane touched down at O'Hare, Sarah felt a deep sense of completion. The contrast between her two flights had been profound, illustrating both the challenges that still existed and the progress that was possible when people committed to treating each other with dignity and respect. Patricia made a point of saying goodbye to Sarah personally as she deplaned. "Thank you for flying with us, Miss Johnson. We hope to see you again soon." "Thank you for providing such excellent service," Sarah replied. "This is how air travel should always be." As Sarah walked through the familiar corridors of O'Hare, she reflected on the lesson of the past few days. Discrimination was still real and painful, but it didn't have to define her experience or limit her success. The key was to continue excelling, to surround herself with people who valued her contributions, and to use her success to create opportunities for others. Tomorrow would bring her partnership meeting with Morrison and Associates and the beginning of an exciting new chapter in her career. But tonight, she was simply grateful to be home, successful, and surrounded by the promise of even greater achievements to come. Sarah arrived at Morrison and Associates the next morning, feeling more confident than she ever had in her professional life. The successful Henderson merger, combined with the glowing feedback from Margaret Henderson and other Los Angeles contacts, had given her a new sense of her own capabilities and worth. Mr. Morrison's assistant greeted her with an unusually warm smile. "Miss Johnson, congratulations on the Henderson deal. Mr. Morrison and the senior partners are waiting for you in the main conference room." Sarah walked through the familiar halls of the law firm, noting how different everything felt now. Where she had once worried about fitting in and proving herself, she now moved with the confidence of someone who had demonstrated her value beyond any doubt. The main conference room was intimidating under normal circumstances, with its massive mahogany table and portraits of the firm's founding partners. Today, however, it felt like exactly where she belonged. All 5 senior partners were present, along with Mr. Morrison. Sarah had worked with each of them on various cases, but she'd never been the sole focus of a meeting with the entire leadership. "Team, Sarah, "Please have a seat," Mr. Morrison said, gesturing to a chair at the head of the table. "We have some important matters to discuss." As Sarah settled into her seat, she noticed that everyone around the table was smiling, never a bat. "Sign in a law firm meeting." "First," Morrison began, "I want to formally commend you on your handling of the Henderson merger. Margaret Henderson called me personally yesterday to express her satisfaction with your work and to discuss future business opportunities with the firm." Sarah felt a warm glow of professional pride. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. It was a complex deal, but very rewarding to work on." "Complex is an understatement," added Catherine Walsh, the firm's managing partner. "The tax implications alone would have challenged attorneys with twice your experience. Your analysis was brilliant." David Chen, another senior partner, leaned forward. "Sarah, in my 25 years with this firm, I've rarely seen a client specifically request to work exclusively with a particular attorney. Margaret Henderson has made it clear that any future Henderson Industries business will come with the condition that you serve as lead counsel." Sarah tried to maintain her composure, but internally she was elated. This kind of client loyalty was the foundation of successful law careers and partnerships. Morrison cleared his throat. "Which brings us to the main purpose of this meeting. Sarah, the senior partners have voted unanimously to offer you a partnership in Morrison and Associates, effective immediately." For a moment, Sarah was speechless. She'd hoped for this outcome, but hearing it officially announced was almost overwhelming. I'm honored," she managed to say. "This is beyond what I dreamed possible when I joined the firm 3 years ago." "Your trajectory has been exceptional," Catherine Walsh continued. "You've brought in more new business than any associate in the firm's history. Your legal work is consistently outstanding, and your client relationships are exemplary. You've earned this partnership." As the partners outlined the details of her new position, increased profit sharing, client development responsibilities, and a path to senior partnership, Sarah felt a deep sense of validation. Every challenge she'd faced, every moment of self-doubt, every instance of discrimination had led to this moment. "There's one more thing," Morrison added as the formal business concluded. "We've received some interesting news from the airline you flew to Los Angeles." Sarah looked up with curiosity, having almost forgotten about her flight experience in the excitement of her business success. Apparently, a federal judge filed a detailed complaint about discriminatory treatment you received on your outbound flight. The airline has launched a full investigation, and they've asked us to forward their formal apology to you. Morrison handed Sarah an elegant letter on airline letterhead. As she read it, her eyebrows rose in surprise. "They're offering you a full refund of your ticket cost, plus vouchers for future first-class travel," Morrison continued. "They've also implemented new training protocols for their staff and taken disciplinary action against the employee involved." Sarah thought about Jennifer's visit to the hotel and her apparent suspension. While she didn't feel vindictive, she was satisfied that the airline had taken the complaint seriously and was working to prevent similar incidents. "More importantly," Catherine Walsh added, "they've asked if you'd be willing to serve as a consultant on their new diversity and inclusion initiatives. Apparently, your professional background and personal experience make you an ideal candidate to help them improve their policies and training." Sarah was intrigued by the opportunity. That could be interesting work, and it might help prevent other passengers from experiencing what I went through. As the meeting concluded and Sarah prepared to leave, Morrison pulled her aside privately. "Sarah, I want you to know that this partnership isn't charity or an attempt to meet diversity goals. You've earned this position through exceptional work and outstanding results. Don't let anyone, including yourself, suggest otherwise." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I appreciate you saying that. I also want you to know that the other partners and I are committed to ensuring that you have every opportunity to succeed as a partner. We see you as a future leader of this firm." That afternoon, Sarah called her best friend Lisa to share the news. "Partner? Sarah, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." Lisa's excitement was infectious. "Remember when we were studying for the bar exam and wondering if we'd even find jobs? Now look at you, partner at one of Chicago's most prestigious firms." "It still doesn't feel real," Sarah admitted. 3 years ago, I was a junior associate hoping to make a good impression. Now I'm responsible for major clients and business development." "You've worked harder than anyone I know," Lisa replied. "You deserve every bit of this success." That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment looking out at the Chicago skyline and reflecting on the remarkable turn her life had taken. The discrimination she'd faced on her flight to Los Angeles seemed like a lifetime ago. Though it had been less than a week, she thought about Mrs. Washington, the elderly woman from her return flight, and her request to reach back and help lift others up. The airline consulting opportunity might be one way to do that, but Sarah knew there would be many other chances to use her success and platform to create positive change. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Judge Davis's number. Judge Davis. What a pleasant surprise. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted to follow up on our flight experience and see how your business meeting went." "Not at all. I'm delighted to hear from you. The meeting went better than I could have hoped, and I actually have some big news to share." As Sarah told Judge Davis about her partnership and the airline's response to his complaint, she could hear his satisfaction and pride through the phone. "Outstanding on all counts," he said warmly. "You've shown that the best response to discrimination is continued excellence and success. Your grandmother would be incredibly proud." "Thank you for everything you did on that flight, Judge Davis. Your support made all the difference." "That's what community is for, Sarah. And now that you're a partner at a major law firm, you'll have even more opportunities to support others who are facing similar challenges." As they concluded their conversation, Judge Davis made one final observation that stayed with Sarah long after they hung up. "Remember, your success isn't just personal achievement. It's a victory for everyone who believes in merit over prejudice, excellence over assumption. Keep climbing, and keep the door open for those who follow." Sarah smiled as she settled in for the evening, already excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. Partnership was just the beginning. 6 months after her partnership at Morrison & Associates began, Sarah was attending a corporate law conference in New York when she encountered a familiar face at the registration desk. It was Jennifer White, the flight attendant from her Los Angeles trip, but she looked completely different, professionally dressed and wearing a conference badge that identified her as a consultant with Inclusive Skies Training Solutions. "Miss Johnson," Jennifer approached hesitantly. "I wasn't sure if you'd remember me." "Of course I remember you, Jennifer. What brings you to a corporate law conference?" Jennifer's expression was a mixture of nervousness and pride. "After our conversation in Los Angeles and the investigation that followed, I made some major life changes. I left the airline and started a diversity training company focused on the hospitality and transportation industries." Sarah was genuinely surprised and impressed. "That's quite a career change. What prompted such a dramatic shift?" "Honestly, you did," Jennifer replied. "That incident on the flight forced me to confront my own biases in a way I'd never done before. But more than that, when you took the time to speak with me at the hotel despite how I'd treated you, it showed me a level of grace and professionalism that I wanted to emulate." They found a quiet corner of the conference lobby to continue their conversation. Jennifer explained how she'd spent months in intensive diversity training, studying the psychological roots of unconscious bias and the business impact of discrimination in service industries. "I realized that what happened between us wasn't an isolated incident," Jennifer continued. "It was part of a larger pattern that affects countless people every day. I wanted to do something meaningful to address that." Sarah was moved by Jennifer's transformation. "That's remarkable, Jennifer. What kind of work are you doing now?" I'm working with airlines, hotels, and restaurants to overhaul their customer service training programs. We focus on recognizing and interrupting unconscious bias, creating inclusive service standards, and helping staff understand that excellent service means treating all customers with dignity and respect. Jennifer pulled out her business card and handed it to Sarah. Actually, I'd love to get your perspective on something. Several airlines have approached me about developing legal compliance training alongside the customer service programs. Would you be interested in consulting on the legal aspects of discrimination in service industries? Sarah considered the offer. Her partnership at Morrison & Associates was thriving. She'd brought in several major clients and was being considered for the executive committee. But the opportunity to create systemic change in an industry where she'd experienced discrimination firsthand was appealing. I'd be very interested in discussing that further, Sarah replied. Why don't you send me some information about what you have in mind? As the conference continued over the next 2 days, Sarah attended sessions on corporate governance and merger law, but she found herself thinking frequently about her conversation with Jennifer. The transformation from flight attendant to diversity consultant was remarkable, and it suggested that positive change was possible, even in unexpected places. On the final day of the conference, Sarah was delivering a presentation on international merger regulations when she noticed Margaret Henderson in the audience. After her session, Margaret approached with a broad smile. Sarah, I didn't expect to see you here. How are things going at Morrison & Associates? Very well, thank you. Partnership has opened up so many new opportunities, including the chance to speak at conferences like this one. Margaret nodded approvingly. I've been following your career with interest. Your work continues to impress everyone who works with you. They talked for several minutes about the business climate and upcoming merger opportunities before Margaret made an unexpected proposition. Sarah, I have something I'd like to discuss with you. Henderson Industries has grown significantly since our merger last year, and we're considering establishing an in-house legal department. I'd like you to consider joining us as our first general counsel. Sarah was stunned. Margaret, that's incredibly flattering, but I've just made partner at Morrison & Associates. I'm not sure I'm ready to leave. I understand, and I'm not asking for an immediate answer. But I want you to know that the position would come with significant autonomy, an excellent compensation package, and the opportunity to build a legal department from the ground up. Think about it. As Sarah flew back to Chicago, she reflected on the unexpected opportunities that seemed to be presenting themselves. The consulting work with Jennifer's company could provide a meaningful way to address discrimination in service industries. Margaret's job offer represented a chance to take on broader business responsibilities and have a direct impact on corporate decision-making. But perhaps most importantly, both opportunities represented the kind of success that transcended personal achievement. They were chances to create positive change and open doors for others who would follow. Back in Chicago, Sarah discussed both opportunities with Mr. Morrison, who was characteristically supportive, despite the potential loss of a valuable partner. Sarah, when I first hired you, I knew you were destined for great things. If Henderson Industries is offering you the chance to be their general counsel, that's a testament to the reputation you've built in just a few years. I haven't decided anything yet, Sarah replied. Morrison & Associates has been my professional home, and partnership here was a dream come true. And you've exceeded every expectation we had when we offered you that partnership, Morrison responded. But sometimes the best way to honor an opportunity is to use it as a stepping stone to even greater achievement. That weekend, Sarah visited her grandmother's grave for the first time since her promotion to partner. She brought fresh flowers and sat quietly beside the headstone, sharing her recent successes and the new opportunities that lay ahead. Grandma, I know you always said that education was the key to opening doors, but I don't think you could have imagined how many doors would open. I'm trying to make choices that would make you proud and that honor the sacrifices you made for my education." As she sat in the peaceful cemetery, Sarah felt a sense of clarity about her path forward. Her success wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about using her platform to create positive change and opportunities for others. The next Monday, Sarah made her decision. She would accept Margaret Henderson's offer to become General Counsel of Henderson Industries, but she would also establish a consulting relationship with Morrison and Associates to maintain her connection to the firm. Additionally, she would work with Jennifer's company to develop legal compliance training for service industries. When she shared her decision with Lisa, her friend's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "Sarah, you're building an empire. General counsel of a major corporation, legal consulting, diversity training. You're going to change entire industries." "I hope so," Sarah replied. "I keep thinking about something Judge Davis told me on that flight, that my success isn't just personal. It's part of a larger story about breaking barriers and creating opportunities for others." 3 months later, Sarah was settling into her new office at Henderson Industries when Margaret stopped by with a cup of coffee and a smile. "How are you adjusting to corporate life?" Margaret asked. "I love it," Sarah replied honestly. "The variety of legal issues, the strategic business decisions, the opportunity to influence company policy from the inside, it's exactly what I hoped it would be." Margaret sat down across from Sarah's desk. "I have some news that I think you'll find interesting. The airline that discriminated against you during your Los Angeles trip has implemented the training program you helped develop, and their customer satisfaction scores have improved significantly. More importantly, they've reported a dramatic decrease in discrimination complaints." Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. That's wonderful news. It shows that positive change is possible when organizations are committed to doing better. "It also shows," Margaret added, "that sometimes the best response to discrimination is not just to overcome it personally, but to use your success to ensure others don't face the same challenges." As Sarah looked out the window of her new office at the Chicago skyline, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From her grandmother's sacrifices to her own determination, from the discrimination she'd faced on that flight to Los Angeles to the partnership and opportunities that had followed, every experience had contributed to who she was today. Her phone buzzed with a text from Judge Davis. "Saw the announcement about your new position in the legal journal. Congratulations. Your grandmother would be incredibly proud of the leader you've become." Sarah smiled as she typed back, "Thank you for reminding me that success is sweeter when it lifts others up too." That evening, as Sarah prepared to leave her new office, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in less than 2 years. The young associate who had been questioned and doubted on a flight to Los Angeles had become a general counsel who was helping to reshape how entire industries approached diversity and inclusion. But perhaps more importantly, she had learned that true success wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about using your platform and opportunities to create positive change for others. Every barrier she broke, every door she opened, every standard of excellence she maintained was part of a larger legacy that would benefit generations of professionals who would follow. As she walked to her car, Sarah's phone rang. It was a young black law student from Northwestern who had been referred to her by Professor Williams, seeking advice about career opportunities in corporate law. "Miss Johnson, I hope you don't mind me calling. Professor Williams said you might be willing to speak with students about breaking into corporate law." "I'd be delighted to help," Sarah replied warmly. "When would be a good time to meet?" As she scheduled the mentoring session, Sarah realized that this was perhaps the most important part of her success story. Not the partnership, not the general counsel position, not even the consulting work, but the opportunity to reach back and help others climb the same ladders she had climbed. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory one final time. Education is the one thing they can never take away from you. But Sarah had learned something even more important. Success shared was success multiplied. The girl who had been questioned about her right to sit in first class had become a woman who was opening first-class opportunities for others, and that, Sarah knew, was a legacy worth building.